Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing an AD carry tier list for 11-16. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. I've already got the support tier list out and some patch notes analysis from the last couple of days, and I'll see if I can do a couple more tier lists as well, maybe jungle, mid, top lane, we'll see. So keep tuning in, we'll have more content for you. Come by, check out the stream as well. We've moved over to Twitch, so it's the Strategy Professor on Twitch. We just decided to make that move to try it out, some different stuff. It's a very friendly, chill community. I know you'll enjoy it. Come by, ask any questions that you may have about League or any other random thing that you want to talk about. I try to answer every single comment in the chat. And we're still going to be coming out with lots of content on YouTube as well. I'm going to be releasing some individual champion gameplay, just kind of recorded from the stream. So if you just want to watch an all Alistar playlist or all Rakan or Janna or whoever your favorite champion is, I'll try to make playlists for them. Just so you can find the champion and watch the champions that you want to see. And then we do other content as well. We do Total War Warhammer, some Burning Crusade Classic raids as a druid, and then I'm going to be covering some Final Fantasy XIV as well. So check out all of that if you enjoy my style of content, but you want to see something other than League. That's there for you as well. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So, not a lot has shaken up. There are a few very interesting builds that I'll get into, especially with Ashe and KogMaw involving Wit's End. So that has kind of developed a little bit over the last couple of patches, but a lot of the same champions are going to be kind of near the top. And I think the very top right now is Samira. This champ just has so many different things going on. And she is a shield bow user. That's another thing that's kind of popped up in the meta that fits in with the Wit's End style of build as well, is these hybrid items that do pretty good damage, but also give you quite a lot of survivability. And so champions that can really take advantage of the shield bow or the Wit's End or both in the case of Ashe are really going to have an edge, because it's hard for them to be assassinated, to be blown up, and they can still put out pretty strong damage. So I think Samira is probably the best one of these overall. Her win rate's not the highest among all ADCs. Many ADCs are actually pretty low on win rates. I think it's one of the lowest win rate roles overall. I'm not 100% about that, but there are a lot of very popular champions, like 14% on Kaisa, 14% pick rate, 11% on Caitlyn. Ezreal's, probably really high as well as far as pick rates go, and they're all in the red, so that's kind of rough. But nevertheless, I think she has a lot of potential, and a big part of that is she just can do so much damage later on, and she scales so well with both flat AD and with the lifesteal off of Shieldbow, because her ultimate applies, I think, full lifesteal. They may have nerfed it to 66%, I can't remember, but it's a lot of lifesteal gets applied on that, and it's a lot of damage. So she has the ability to just dive in there and just completely delete teams full of squishies. That you're seeing really common right now. Like, there are not that many tanks that are popular in the meta outside of maybe Tom Kench. They're sort of pure tanks that she's not going to be able to blow up. So even if you hold her down early, which she's okay early, she can definitely fight, especially if you pair her together with a knock-up champion like an Alistar, Rakan, something like that, so you can leverage her passive and get that extra CC, get that extra dash, that extra little bit of damage. She can fight pretty well early on, just kind of depending on which support you pair her with. And it's just that gap closer, and the reset on the gap closer is very nice. So she has pretty good mobility, really high damage, good at going toe-to-toe with a lot of bruisers out there right now. And you're just going to want to go for the shield bow almost always first. And then after that, you do have a couple of choices. I think Collector is where a lot of people go, just to make sure that you get those last hits and you can keep snowballing, because your ultimate is going to keep ticking just as... it's almost like a dot type of damage, so it's going to ensure that you're going to get that last hit, and you're going to snowball even harder so the support doesn't accidentally get it with Ignite or something like that. So it's a really good item. Lethality is obviously pretty good too. She has pretty high base damage on her ult. And her ult, of course, it's always up, right? There's no cooldown on it. As long as you get the setup, you can just constantly run around with your Leona or, whatever, and just, you're always ready to make plays and to get that ultimate and to get those resets. That's another thing that's really strong about her, is the no cooldown on the ult. Then after that, sometimes people go for Infinity Edge. I've seen Bloodthirster. Some of this is going to depend on how much shield breaking they have and how much grievous wounds they have. If they don't have any shield breaking, if no one's getting the shield breaking item, or they don't have a Blitzcrank or a Rel or anything like that can break the shields, Bloodthirster's a really good defensive option. It's kind of like Shield Bow, 2.0. Or Infinity Edge is just if you really, really want a ton of damage as that third item, then that's where you can go. So, as you can see on the chart, it does pretty well in the early game, kind of dips in the mid game after she gets that Shield Bow. She's like, all right, and then late game, if it keeps going, then she's going to keep winning. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, it just pairs together with a lot of great stuff, and the key there is she's just beefy and does a lot of AoE damage in team fights. So, she's very, very difficult to handle when she gets ahead. Ezreal's another one, and I could honestly see putting Ezreal anywhere, S to B tier, tier 1, 2, or 3, depending on the content creator and, how much faith you have in people to play him well. But I do think it's difficult to argue that his potential is up there. And a lot of it is just based on his kit, and he's got a great combination of kind of that hybridity where he can put out pretty good damage, and he can be pretty tanky with some of these builds, and he has really good mobility and range. So it's very, very difficult to punish Ezreal with his current itemization. So he opens up a lot of possibilities for your team comp. So you can have a roaming support, for example, which can be extremely powerful if you have a Leona, an Alistar, something like that wants to go invade with your jungler or wants to, go sit on mid or whatever. Ezreal can still farm most of the time, unless someone wants to step up and tank those Qs, which becomes pretty hard even once he gets Sheen in the early game. He's going to be able to get his farm. It's really, really hard to zone him off the wave and deny him his farm. So he has that level of safety kind of built into his kit, that level of consistency and reliability. Also, if your team wants to make the bot lane weak side, which I don't recommend, I think the jungler should almost always play around bottom in solo queue because there are 4 people bottom, in every other lane there's only 2 people. So if you take down bottom, you're shutting down 2 enemies as a jungler, and you are, buffing up 2 allies, including probably the most important person to buff up, which is ADC. Because a lot of ADCs are completely worthless if they don't have gold, but they can completely take over games if they do. So it's very volatile as far as the role goes. But if your jungler's not going to play around bot side, or if you think their jungler, is, and they might dive you a lot, then Ezreal is going to be a pretty good pick for that. Just because he has so much mobility, and he can clear the wave once he gets to 6. He can use his ult to help him clear the wave and sort of fend off a dive if he has to for at least one wave. So he's got a lot of stuff going on, and then he has really good poke damage too. Right? So he can all in and burst if he hits everything in the early game. If your Leona goes in and you hit your W and then you E in, auto, Q auto, he can do pretty good damage even with the Sheen. But he scales pretty well late game as well. When you start thinking about, Divine Sunder, that proc, he's really hard to burst out. And then a lot of times, he'll go for Frozen Heart against AD champions, especially AD assassins. And this becomes extremely difficult to kill. So he's got this blink that's up like every 3 seconds, really long range, healing, large health pool, large resistances. So he's just a pest. There's almost no answer to him if it's a good Ezreal. And his team's even doing remotely well. Like, it's so difficult to shut him down. So, it's still just going to be Conquer, and then just going for the footwear and the biscuits. The extra mana helps you out early, a little bit of extra sustain to keep you in the lane. And then footwear is nice because, you just get that free 300 gold you can save, and that helps you get to your item power spikes a little bit more. So he does kind of suffer a little bit if you're having, clean front-to-back 5v5 team fights, and they have 1 or 2 huge tanks, and the enemy has a hyper-scaling ADC, so something like a Jinx or a Twitch, KogMaw, something like that. They're going to put out a lot more sustained damage than he does, particularly to multiple targets if those champs go like Hurricane and everyone's grouped up. So that's kind of his one weakness, is he doesn't have a lot of AoE damage, and just his sustained auto attack damage is not as high as some other champs. But it's just that uptime where you can't stop him from putting out damage in fights. If he's hitting his Q, you can't zone him off. And he has like pretty high burst damage, and he can deal with divers really well. So I think he is a very strong champion, but I think you do have to be skilled to make it work on him, and he can be punished in certain scenarios, like a 5v5 versus a more fed enemy ADC. Okay, Ashe is another one that I think is gonna be okay. Just making sure my mic was working there. The computer reset a little bit ago, and I forgot to check. It is. We're good. But Ashe is another one that I think has come up to prominence. Now, it wasn't too long ago that a lot of people, like Doublelift, were saying that Ashe was one of the worst ADCs in the game because her damage was kind of low and she was fairly immobile. And I think he was right for a while. But people have developed a new build on her to actually make her the highest pick ban influence champion, which means she's picked a lot and has a high win rate and, gets banned some. But a lot of that just comes into how often are they picked and how often do they win. And the answer is a lot in both categories right now because of this new build. So she's going to go Shield Bow into Wit's End. And they buffed Wit's End a few patches ago to make it something that has been better. And you can see how she's trended since early July, right? Once people started kind of experimenting with this build. And I thought it was pretty troll at the beginning. I'm like, okay, that's okay. But like if the enemy team doesn't have a lot of magic damage, then you're losing a lot of value on Wit's End. But the thing is, it's still going to be a really good item, even if they are almost all AD, for a few reasons. So I think they buffed the flat AD on it from 30 to 40, I believe was the buff they gave it. So 40 AD and 40% attack speed is already pretty good. 40% attack speed, I believe, is 1,000 gold value, and 40 AD is probably somewhere near 1,500 gold value. May not be exactly that. My math is just napkin math off the top of my head. But it's something like that. It's around 2,500 gold just for those base stats. So then you just have to ask yourself, okay, well, is the rest of this, does that add up to 3,100 gold in value? And I think the answer definitely is yes. I mean, we do have the internet here. I guess we can just look it up, right? But it's extremely cost efficient. So it's 106 just based off of those stats there. And then when you're looking at the bonus movement speed and trying to quantify that, and then you're quantifying even just 15 on hit, just the base amount, if you could somehow have this appear in your inventory at level 1, it's going to be 3,900 gold. So you're getting like over 800 gold value free when you complete this item. And then once you get closer to level 18, then you're getting 5,500 gold. So you're getting 2,400 gold for free on this, which is just crazy. Like, that's so much value. So you're probably not going to see this number, but it's probably not uncommon to get somewhere between 4,500 and 5,000 gold. So when you buy this, you're almost getting an item and a half, and that's why it's so strong. And ADCs like all of this. The on-hit damage works really well with someone who has a lot of attack speed, like Ashe, when she turns on her Q. Now, should be noted that each little 3-burst volley that she puts out, each one of those does not trigger it. It's only once per auto attack. So even though she hits 3 times on it, it only triggers on-hit abilities once. So it's not like turbo OP on her. It's just good. The only thing that has a special interaction with that is Black Cleaver, when she used to get Black Cleaver many years ago, because Black Cleaver doesn't say on-hit damage. It says whenever someone deals physical damage, and so that's why she got multiple stacks off a Cleaver. So it doesn't trigger Wit's End or Blade of the Ruined King or anything like that multiple times. But it's still good. It triggers it once, and that extra movement speed is excellent on her because that allows her to just kite better, to run people down better, because she's obviously slowing everyone all the time. She's going to be taking that Inspiration Rune, which gives you the 15% extra movement speed when you're moving towards people that are slowed. So just gives her that extra little bit of mobility that she's been missing for a long time. And of course, the magic resist is really good, right? So you're not going to get bursted out by the Dianas or by the LeBlancs or whatever, or it's certainly going to be a lot harder, especially when you combine it with Shield Bow, because remember, shields, as I've been saying for years, shields scale with your resistances. So that shield that you have doesn't take true damage. It's not just going to mitigate 500 damage, when you complete it in the mid-game. If you have, 100 magic resist, then it's effectively going to give you 750 shield. It's going to be 50% more effective against magic damage. And that shield lasts forever. Well, not forever. I was looking at the 8 seconds. That's the extra AD that you have. But it lasts for 3 seconds. And it just makes me ask, what are they thinking with some of these items? I don't want to go on too much of a tirade, but seriously? Janna's like shield early on only shields for 240 as a main ability. It decays over time, and if the shield breaks, then you don't get the AD anymore. You lose the AD. They nerfed that a long time ago. Then you have Shield Bow that comes around here. It's like a double Janna shield that does not decay, lasts for 3 seconds, and they keep the bonus even if the shield breaks. They get to keep the, 25 extra AD. And it's got all these other stats on it. Like, this is still like a pretty good item, cost-wise. It's probably about 100% efficient. And it's basically got a double passive. But anyways, item's just really OP right now in the meta, and she uses it very well, especially because of Wit's End. It gives her that level of protection she hasn't had historically as sort of a squishy, relatively immobile ADC. Now she's got additional protection. And then she still has all that utility that she's always had, right? So she's got her W for some really solid poke in the early game. It's very difficult to dive into her, and there are a lot of dive champions in the meta that just want to run at her right now. You think about stuff like Diana, Zen Zhao, who are really popular, stuff like Gwen. It makes it really difficult to dive her, and just to even gap close onto her. And then she has the extra jungle scouting with Hawkshot, which is, really important right now when there are a lot of invading junglers, and the early game just matters so much, and the snowball, just being able to track that jungler is huge. And then, of course, your ultimate sets up so well with so many other champions in the meta right now, because so many people are playing these like hard carry champs that have very little utility, like the ones I just mentioned, the Dianas, the Gwens, the Zen Zhaos. They're going to have a harder time starting fights unless they just run at people a lot of times. They just don't have a lot of CC. And so, having someone like Ashe on your team who now has that survivability, has some respectable damage, because nobody's playing mega tanks, it's all like relatively squishy bruiser champs, and has that utility to start a fight is awesome. And obviously pairs super well with a lot of the popular supports. Any of the tank stuff, the Alistar, Leona, Rakan, even Zyra, who's pretty popular as a support right now. She pairs together really well with a lot of stuff. So, really good with Lulu as well, because then you get even more movement speed, even more attack speed, even more survivability. So, she just plays really well with a lot of stuff that could be on your team, and plays really well against stuff on the enemy team right now as well. So, super strong champ. Definitely try her out if you haven't in the meta. I think she's becoming one of the most popular, if not the most popular ADC that still holds like a, almost a 53% win rate. Yeah, she's number 2 right now. So, very strong champ. Definitely try her out. I thought the Wit's End build was troll at first. It is not. It is actually really good. Okay, Tristana is another one that I think I had a hard time deciding whether I wanted to put her in tier 1 or tier 2. I think that in the best case scenario, she's definitely tier 1. I think she's the hardest snowballing ADC, or certainly up there with like Samira, just because she can force fights so well with a lot of these other dive champs, especially in skirmish situations, because of that rocket jump. You jump in, and it just does a tremendous amount of damage in the early game. That bomb, right? So whenever that bomb goes off, it's going to be like 300 damage or something. The rocket jump itself does damage, and with Halo Blade, she gets 3 really quick attacks in there, and her ultimate just does a baseline 300 damage point click, which a lot of people were surprised by that, because people don't expect even mages to do that much early, right, as base damage with no scaling. But she definitely does that much damage. And not only does it do really high base damage, but it also can blow people back, so she has multiple forms of protection. And it says it only hits one person, and it does, damage-wise, but it can knock back all units that are close by. So, when you have a bunch of melee champions all balled up trying to run at you, you can blow them all back. And just the squirreliness of her jump, too, is something that a lot of people underestimate unless you've played against or with a really good Tristana, is that if you time that rocket jump where you're going down, but you have not yet taken off, you're immune to CC. And they call that buffering. So a lot of people don't understand that, and it looks really weird. It's like Season 1 squirrel code, but they've left it in. They just like it as a mechanic. But if she is going down like that, even if like Blitzcrank hits her with a hook, if Nautilus's missile, like his ultimate is about to hit her for that knockup, she ignores all of that and jumps anyways. So she is extremely difficult to get a hold of if someone knows how to do that jump properly. And it's very, very frustrating. As someone who plays a lot of engaged champs in support, it's really, really frustrating to deal with that. So she's very safe, good against ganks. She can use the jumps aggressively. She can use them defensively. She gets resets in multiple ways. So if she gets 4 stacks of that bomb and blows it up, she gets a reset, and she gets a reset if she gets a kill or an assist. So you can constantly jump around, reposition, jump in, kill somebody on a dive, jump back out. You've got the ult, to knock people away. Pretty good attack speed. Steroid with the Q goes over 100% extra damage. The bomb can blow up and take down towers and plates really early. So if you do get ahead, you do push them in a tower, you can punish them pretty hard with the explosion. So she has a lot going on in her kit. Scales pretty well overall. Her range is short early on, so that's something to keep in mind. And she has to do the explosion on the minions. You can't toggle that anymore. So that means that the wave is just always going to be kind of messed up. So Tristana often will have a little bit of lower CS than other ADCs because every time those minions blow up, it sort of changes the math on all of the other CS. Especially if you get pushed in the tower, if you're in a losing situation, and she's really bad with passive type of lanes, like with a Soraka or a Janna or something like that. It can be very difficult because if they have something that's like hard dominant that can zone you off that wave, right? If they have something like Samira, Leona, or Draven, Leona, or Jhin, Alistar, or something like that, if they push you into tower, it's really hard to last sit under tower because whenever you kill those minions, it's going to splash, and then the tower is going to start doing, weird amounts of damage. So that is her one weakness, is she can't really control the minion wave very well, and as a result, her CS is going to be a little bit lower, especially if she's pushed in. She also doesn't have any AoE damage abilities. She's got her bomb, I guess, but limited AoE damage abilities compared to something like a Samira, who can start going off in team fights, or like a Runan's Chinks, Runan's KogMaw, any of those types of champs are going to do more in a clean front-to-back 5v5 team fight. So, and she doesn't have any CC other than knockback, so that is definitely something to consider. So she's really an all-in, like, hard snowball, skirmisher, single target, just delete them type of champion. And she does that very well with Kraken, with Halo Blades, the bomb, your ultimate, jump resets. She's one of the few people that gets Stormrazor for the extra burst damage and the slow early on. So she's very, very good if you have aggression in your lane, and if you get ahead early, it just feels impossible to farm safely from her, unless maybe you're like Ezreal. It's you can't even walk up in the lane. If she gets like 2 kills and she's got a Leona with her, good luck. You better start calling down the jungler or something, because you're not gonna be able to step up to that wave again. Okay, KogMaw's another one kind of in the same boat as Ashe, he has risen to prominence recently in terms of win rate. He's pushing almost 53% also, and it's a very similar build path. He's going to go Wits. Now, there are some different things you can do with him. I still think that Shield Bow is going to be very good, but Ginsu's is particularly good as well because his W counts as an on-hit ability, and so you can trigger it multiple times with the Ginsu's for that extra damage. That's obviously going to be very powerful. And the fact that it's magic damage is really nice. If your team has a lot of AD and you just want a little bit of magic damage on your team, KogMaw deceptively does quite a bit of magic, especially if you take Wits in, because the on-hit is magic damage. So that might be enough diversified damage to make the enemy team respect it and get magic resist, or get blown up if they don't. So he's deceptively like a pretty good choice if you need an AP champ in the bot lane. I think he's way better than Ziggs. I forgot to put Ziggs on the list here. I'd probably put Ziggs in B and put him on here. I know he's been very popular. He did get nerfed this patch. We'll talk about him in a second, but I'm not a huge believer in solo queue. His win rate's okay. But anyways, I digress. Back on to KogMaw. His pick rate and all that stuff has gone down a little bit over time, but nevertheless, still really good. Hypercarry does a ton of single target damage. If for some reason they are playing a tank, you do melt those very quickly. Or if you have a Lulu on your team, he's extremely good with Lulu. You get the extra movement speed, you get the extra on-hit damage, attack speed, and then she has that protection, from the ultimate and the shield. Um, so he's just pretty much going to outduel almost anybody. When he turns on all of his stuff, he's got decent items, and especially if he has an enchanter, especially Lulu, to buff him up even further, his damage just scales multiplicatively through the roof. So, almost everybody seems to go Wit's End, and this is so strong on him. A big part of it is the movement speed, because he doesn't have any way to like speed up himself. And when you turn on that W in lane, a lot of people, they just cannot trade with you. They can't fight. You have really long range. You do a ton of damage. So most people are just going to try to run away whenever you turn that on. Well, now, if you turn that on, you start hitting them, you can actually run them down and chase them, and potentially kill them or run them out of lane. So having that extra movement speed steroid is really, really good on him. That also allows you to kite some of these people coming in with the movement speed as well. So just a really strong item on him, especially once you get that shovel for that movement speed early on, or whatever that thing is called there. He starts to go off. And then having the magic damage protection is very good, especially if you're against, there's a lot of poke champions that are popular right now. You got your Luxes, you've got your Zeraths, Zyras, Brands, Vel'Kozes, all of that stuff is getting pretty popular, so that's handy. And then after that, as far as like second items go, it just sort of depends what the team comp is. Gensu's is going to do like way more single target damage, but Runin's is going to do multi-target damage, and that's going to give you wave clear. So if you're going to be 5v5ing a lot, I think that Runin's is probably better. But if you think you're going to be just focusing down single targets, like trying to melt that Leona or the Alistar or whatever that's on the front line, then Gensu's might be a better option for you. And Shield Bow is still going to be pretty strong as well if you think you need that little bit of extra burst protection. If you're feeling greedy, you can go for Kraken. That's like the maximum amount of damage, but you are going to be a lot more susceptible to divers. So he has some options. You just kind of have to measure what you need, but really, really good hyper scaling, hyper carry, big damage option, who does pretty respectable damage in the laning phase. Okay, Vayne's another one that I kind of have mixed feelings about Vayne, because if she gets to like 2 items and she starts going off in the mid game, she's very, very difficult to stop. So just because she has so much mobility, she can constantly tumble around, reposition. She's very difficult to dive. She goes invisible, so it's hard to target her. When she's going off with her ultimate, she can knock you back, pin you into walls, and this does a very large amount of single target damage. Now, she is short range, and she is very, very weak in the laning phase, in my opinion, because she doesn't have any wave clear, short range, and like no trading abilities, really. The only way you trade is just with auto attacks. Like, she's just a strictly auto attack champion with pretty much no burst. So you just constantly have to reposition, make sure you're in the right place at the right time, and just have good reaction times to knock people back and to dodge stuff, right? Versus, someone like Samira or whatever, whenever she gets charged up, a lot of times she can just dash in and press R, and it's just going to delete everybody, right? You don't have to worry like as much about your positioning, especially if you're in a really strong, or if you're already pretty fed. You can just go in and blow people up with abilities, right? Ashe does require good positioning as well, but she at least has her arrow to kind of set up her plays. Vayne just has auto attacks, and that's it. So really, really weak in the early game, but does really start taking off later on. Most people go Kraken into Phantom Dancer. I'm not sure why more people aren't doing Wit's End on her, because I feel like that would be really strong, especially against other magic damage users. And the movement speed is so good, because that pairs so well with her ultimate, with her passive, just to allow you to really run down and reposition. It looks like that is the highest win rate second item by like a couple of percentage points, right? 59%. It's just not the most popular. But I think if they have any amount of AP on their team, if they have like a Diana, a Gwen, anything, Lux, I feel like Wit's End is a really, really good buy on her. So yes, it's probably less damage than Phantom Dancer. Phantom Dancer does give you the extra movement speed, which is nice. You do get the crit. It has less AD on it, has less attack speed on it. Actually, you do get the 30% extra bonus attack speed. So it does have the movement. It does have the movement. It does have some pretty strong attack speed on it. So it's good. Like, this is definitely a more defensive option. But I don't know, man. I still feel like this is a super, super strong item. So I would definitely consider it on her. Now, Shield Bow, depending on the comp again, Kraken's the greedy one, does a lot of damage. Shield Bow, I would err on the side of Shield Bow most of the time, just because you can't do any damage if you're dead. And there's so much burst damage out there right now. And it just combines so well with Wit's End, again, because the magic resistance applies to the shield on Shield Bow. So it's going to make it almost impossible, if you have these two items, for Diana to one-shot you, or for, you know, LeBlanc or whoever to one-shot you. So that's where I would go with it. But you can get greedy and go for more damage if you're going to be against tanks. Okay, Varus. Maybe in Challenger or Pro, I could see him being at the top. And if you're a really good Varus player, I think that he still can be really strong. But you got to hit the arrows. You got to hit the skill shots. And some people can do it. Some people can't. So I think of him, he's kind of like an Ezreal, but he actually has cooldowns. So you have to wait every now and then, versus Ezreal's Q is just kind of always up. So he's like Ezreal with bigger hits, but actually has cooldowns. Not as mobile, so you can definitely get a hold of him and blow him up. He does have the ultimate, so he contributes more to team fights, I think, than Ezreal does. If you hit that ult on somebody in a team fight, it just disrupts so much because everyone has to spread out all of a sudden. And, you know, that can be really problematic in a lot of situations. And he does pair really well with kind of this lethality build, this Dustblade into Muramana sort of build is pretty good on him. So it's weird though, because, you know, this is saying that like lethal tempo is good on him. I still feel like it's Dark Harvest is where most people would want to be, but he is sort of in this strange space where he does want to auto attack a lot and then land his ability, so he triggers those blight stacks for the extra percentage damage. So he's kind of an odd duck. Now, it does look like lethal tempo, press the attack, all that stuff is better than Dark Harvest on him. And Dark Harvest, I guess, takes a while to stack up. But he's pretty much always going to go for the Dustblade, although Shield Bow is a better pick a lot of the time. But the thing is, with crit, the crit really doesn't help you out if you're just spamming arrows a lot. So Shield Bow is a bit of a weird pick. But I think Muramana, Dustblade, and then probably Serelda's Grudge. That is really nice because that does slow them for a little bit if you hit them with an ability. So if you just like throw your E on them or something like that, it applies a slow, and then it's going to give them that extra little bit of slow. Even if they flash or dash, they're still going to be slowed for that 1 second, and that can help you hit your R or help you hit your Q. Or you can use your Q to set up for your R. So it does offer some pretty good things, and then it also has the armor penetration on it, which is strong. So I think he's good if you want poke and you want some crowd control. If you're really good at hitting those, you know, major sniper shots, then he can be very good, especially when you're, you know, everyone's just kind of facing off, A-ramming or positioning around objectives, and he just gets to sit there and throw those. If he hits one or two of them, then, you know, the fight's over. They have to run or they're going to die probably. So he is very, very good for that, and that's why people are playing him in Pro a little bit more, just because that poke is so handy. Okay, Jinx is another one. Her win rate has fallen down, but I still think she's good. She does take a few items to come online, but she's still not like a complete pushover in the laning phase. Like, she has pretty good range with those rockets. They increased her range a few patches ago to where it's like, I don't even, like 650 or something to start with. Maybe it's not as far as Caitlyn, but it's really good range with the rockets early. And it gives her wave clear. She's got the zap for poke. And then those chompers are surprisingly pretty effective in a lot of situations. I know it's really annoying as Rakan to try to get around those chompers when she drops those, because you can't jump over them. You know, if you try to go through them, then, you know, they're going to get you. So that is annoying. And then you can pair it together with a lot of other supports, you know. So if Leona engages on somebody and you drop those chompers, it's an extra nice little chunk of CC and damage that you can do to them. So that is pretty handy. And then, of course, you have that big rocket that almost is always good for 1 or 2 kills per game when people just aren't paying attention and you catch them out on it. And she's just one of the queens of clean 5v5 AoE team fights, she's going to just destroy everybody. Once you get Hurricane and, Kraken early on, and you just start chucking those rockets, especially Infinity Edge later, she can just really delete people, and she gets those resets so she can get the rundowns and all that. She is still very vulnerable to engages. She does have the chompers, helps a little bit, but she's still going to get blown up in a lot of situations. So you got to have good peel, but if you do have someone who can protect you, and you have that good, clean, front-to-back 5v5 team fight, she's going to be one of the best. We'll speed it up because I want to try to see if I can keep this under 40 as much as possible. And then we got Kaisa. She's still pretty good. I think Kaisa's just a victim of, itemization not being fantastic on her right now. Just because she has to have very specific items in order to get her transformations on time and get the correct transformations. You need to get that Q. So you don't really have the option of going for something like a Wit's End or something like that early. You kind of have to go for the big ticket mythic, which is still good in a lot of situations, but it does kind of lower her flexibility a bit. And so she still does do Kraken with Halo Blades. Pretty nice, damage early on. And then a lot of times she'll just go for the Collector just because that's going to give her the transformation on her Q. Get that first part of the Collector with the Dirk. And it is nice. It is a little awkward to have lethality on a champion who also does, decent magic damage, right? With her passive and her W doing magic damage. They don't get any benefit from lethality. So, that's a little weird. And these don't have any defensive stats on it, and she doesn't have much defense. She's got the shield off of her ult, but she can definitely get blown up if she gets caught out. And the fact that she is low range, she's 525 range, I believe, can make it very, very difficult against some of these intimidating lanes where they can, push you back and pressure you off the lane, or even in team fights where the enemy team has a Diana or a Xin Zhao or some other really high damage gap closing champ. Which is almost everything in the meta right now. That can be a little rough. So she's okay. She still does a lot of damage, early on with her Qs, especially if you can get the isolation. She can reposition and dive with other people on the back line. I think Samira is better at that. Samira can't dive as far, but Samira is tougher. She has more survivability with the shield bow, the lifesteal, her ability to basically be immune to range CC and damage with her W. I think she's a lot better at just diving into the mix and just going with the squad and blowing everybody up. I think that's what Kaisa used to excel at until Samira was released, but now I think Samira does it a little better. Nevertheless, I still think Kaisa's pretty good, although, one of her strengths, her versatility and itemization this season, I think got changed a lot to where she just kind of is pigeonholed into going Kraken, Collector, Infinity Edge second. I guess you could go, I don't know, Phantom Dancer or something, maybe second instead of Collector, but most people are going to want to go for Collector. It looks like she is finding some success with the Wit's End, so maybe that'll help her out some if people try her out. I'm not really sure about the breakpoints there. It has less AD than Collector does, but it does give you that extra defense. And the extra attack speed might help you reach your attack speed threshold on time. I just don't remember it offhand, what it is, at which level, and whatever. But maybe with Berserker Boots and your Mythic and Wit's End, maybe you can get that double evolve faster. I'm not really sure. But either way, I think that she can be effective right now. And then Sivir, I think is better than a lot of people think she is. Yes, her ultimate is good. It does help a lot of the meatballs run in there. Who want to gap close, the Xin Zhaos, the Dianas, and it helps out your supports like your Leonas, your Alistars, and stuff like that. So she still has that utility that she's always had, but I think it's really this new lethality build with her that is kind of bringing her back sort of up into probably tier 2 or tier 3 in a lot of people's minds, where now it looks like a lot of people are doing the crit build. But I've seen the lethality build a lot, and I know that Sneaky and Double Lift and people were memeing on that, saying how bad that was, but it does a lot of damage. It has a lot of wave clear early, and it basically turns her into a Varus type of champ with really good poke with that Q. If you hit both of those, now the arrow I believe is faster, and you don't have to hit with both parts with Varus, but she can do so much damage. Especially when people aren't paying attention in team fights. That's just a huge amount. And the fact that you can just get all those ricochet bounces as well. So the Q can't crit, but it is affected by lethality. And that's why if you're maxing Q, if you're going for a poke style for really heavy wave clear, then I think this is the build that you're going to want to go. The crit is good if you're going to have clean front-to-back 5v5 team fights and you want to do more damage, especially to tanks at like 3 items. I think the ricochet can be better. If everyone's going to be grouped up and you're getting all those bounces, yes, that's really good because the ricochets can crit. But I just feel like it takes more time to get to that build, right? Versus the Mirror Mana Dustblade, like you're really strong early on in the game. And yeah, you fall off, especially against tanks and stuff like that later, but I think just getting that snowball and really leveraging your ability to make plays in that mid game when you still kind of, everyone's just skirmishing, people aren't like grouped up all the time yet, and just being able to run people down and do that heavy burst damage. I think that's kind of where she wants to be. So we'll see. It kind of makes her like a little mini Varus, like I said, someone with utility that has really good poke if you go for the lethality build. But I've seen that build be pretty effective in a lot of situations, especially if you have a support that can push and poke with you. You got a Lux, you know, that kind of crew, Zyra. I think she pairs really well with that type of stuff. And then the final couple of champs here. I guess we're a little over 40 minutes, but whatever. Twitch, I think, is underrated. He's like the perennially underrated ADC. And that is always, especially any tier list that's targeting like low diamond and lower, which is what we're doing, like kind of silver to low diamond sort of range. Twitch is so good because a lot of people are just going to underestimate the invisibility. Like, stealth is so strong in solo queue because it just allows you to choose the fights that you want and gives you better snowball potential. Just because people don't respect it. People don't buy enough control wards, and even if they do, a lot of times you can still go through the lane and really start taking off. So he does pretty good damage in the early game in sustained fights. If he doesn't get blown up immediately, if you're allowed to land like 5 auto attacks, so if your Leona starts the fight and gums him up, he's really good at that. Now he's bad if their Leona starts the fight on you. He does not do a lot of burst damage. He does not have a lot of mobility, so that's bad. So it just kind of depends. If he's in a winning lane, he can actually go toe-to-toe with other ADCs. If he just drops that cask on him and auto attacks a few times, his Contaminate does a lot of damage in the early game, which is nice. But then it's really kind of that mid to late game where I think he starts to shine, where he can roll up invisible, get those assassinations, but then also he can just kind of hang out in team fights in the area and just wait like a smart Twitch and wait on the enemy to use their cooldowns. Like just watch that Leona use her ult on somebody else, or the Ashe use her ult on somebody else. Just wait for a second if you have the luxury of doing that. Just chill, be patient, and then as soon as you see them blow their cooldowns on your tank or something, then you just pop out, press ult, and then just delete everybody. The biggest mistake that I see a lot of Twitches do is they try to go really close with the ultimate, and they're trying to be aggressive to the point where they still want to kill the enemy even if they flash. So they want to be able to ult them through a flash range. But in doing so, they get so close they can be hit by stuff. So then, you know, they'll try to show up in melee against a Silas or something like that. They'll show up within like 300 range and start ulting him, but then he just turns around and chains him in the face and blows him up, right? You see so many Twitches do that. The melee Twitch. The melee Twitch meme. So if you do want to play Twitch, please just don't be greedy. Be conservative with him. You know, obviously if it's something where you're 100% going to kill him, right? If you're 5-0 and you're sneaking up on an 0-5 Ezreal who's alone, sure, open up close to him. But be very cautious, especially in team fights, of doing that. Because he has 850 range with his ult. Use the range. Like, hang out on the back line, you know, at max range, or at least like 700 range or something, and just start blowing everybody up. So that's the thing. I think a lot of people are greedy with him, but he's very good, especially with Yuumi, because they can both go invisible, or Lulu. Kind of like with KogMaw, he just scales really, really well if he gets those steroids on him, right? The extra attack speed, movement speed, ardent sensor, all that stuff. He loves all of it. So it's very good. Now, I haven't seen if he's been doing Wit's End lately. I think it could be very good on him because his ultimate applies Wit's End, like on hit effect. So does Hurricane. He likes both of those. and that's why historically Blade of the Ruined King was really good on him. Yeah, that's what he's going for. So I think he's a pretty good user of that item as well. Gives him the protection he needs as an immobile ADC. Gives him the movement speed to stick to people, to run them down. So I really like that as a second option. The AP option is still out there. I think it's a little gimmicky. You know, as you can see, the win rate has come down. They did nerf the AP ratio, I think, a while ago on some of his abilities. So if your team really, really needs AP damage, I guess you can do it. But especially at that second item, it's just so awkward because you have to get death cap, which just takes forever. Like, you're going to need 5 or 6 kills to get this in a reasonable amount of time as a second item. Because there's just not a good on-hit AP item that he can get. You know, I guess you could do, like, Wit's End with Nashers, but it's probably sort of awkward. And neither one of those are mythic, so you're not getting a mythic bonus. So, I don't know. It's a little weird. I think Kraken or Gale Force are good. Gale Force does allow you to go for those assassination bursts, and that allows you to run people, or dodge skill shots, rather. So that is really nice. But Kraken does allow you to just really delete people a lot. I don't know. I guess Kraken is a lot better against tanks, is really what it comes down to. The Gale Force is going to give you the burst against squishies, single targets, or just repositioning, but Kraken is going to give you higher sustained damage, which is awkward on Twitch because you really do want to kill people within that 5-second window when your ult's going off. You don't want to have these, like, 10 or 20 second fights. He just loses so much power when he doesn't have his ult. So but both of them have about the same win rate, though, so it just kind of depends on what you want. But anyways, I think he can be pretty good. Okay, and then we'll just really quickly just say a couple words about the last one. I think Aphelios, he's okay. He's extremely high skill cap. He's very starved for items, and with most people, I would rather just play something else. Jhin did get buffed on this patch. He does have a pretty good win rate. I mean, B might be a little unfair. Maybe he should be tier 2, but I feel like just a lot of the runes and items just aren't fantastic on him. Like, he still can do, like, Gale Force Collector, that type of stuff. I just feel like the Tristana has kind of taken over as the early game aggressive champion of choice, and I don't know. Like, he just doesn't use a lot of the new Vogue items, you know, that are really kind of taken over with the Wit's End and the Shield Bow and stuff like that. So he's all right. It's not that he's bad. It just feels like he's just not as dominant as he once was, and he just doesn't scale quite as hard as some of the other ones, at least in the early to mid game. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I know Doublelift has said that, you know, Jhin is one of the highest scaling ADCs. I mentioned Doublelift a lot because I watched the triple stream with Sneaky, Doublelift, and Meteos. It's great. I recommend checking it out. Just because you get kind of 3 different voices and perspectives. And they get off topic. They say some silly stuff sometimes, but usually they do have some pretty good insights, especially into ADCs and supports and things like that. So I think that Jin's okay. And then Misfortune, you just never see this champ anymore. It feels like she should be good, or at least, like, playable with a lethality type of build, but again, doesn't use a lot of the new items particularly well, and it's just relatively immobile and can get blown up, but she still can be pretty good. And then Xayah is, like, if this was like a challenger tier list, she'd probably be like S tier or A tier. She's really hard to play, but I think that she is quite good right now against a lot of these diver comps. Her ult just nullifies most dives, and then she can turn it around and completely blow people up. So you can work around it, but it's just really, really hard to position around her in a team fight, especially when she has, you know, so many tools to dodge you, and there's just, you know, if there's just a lot of CC going around, it's hard to position. So as far as, like, Leona's, Alistar's, and other support champs, Rakan, and she does a lot of damage early, especially if you have Rakan on your team. And I think Rakan is low-key one of the better supports right now. I know I'll always say that, but I really think he is quite good, and especially at higher elo, and Xayah obviously is going to be really good with him. So the dynamic duo is back. I think they are strong, but she is hard to play, and you're not always going to have a Rakan on your team. So that's why I think B is probably pretty fair. Akshan, haven't seen him a lot in the bot lane. I've seen some games where he just does, like, some nutty stuff and really goes off in, like, mid and top with some good Akshan. So I feel like if you are good on him, you can make him work, but he's got a really low win rate, really low. It's like 45 or 46%, so it's tough, and I just don't see him a lot in the bot lane, but I think that he does have the potential to work. Ziggs, I feel, is really overrated in solo queue. Like, he has okay wave clear, like, early on. Obviously, great wave clear later, but early on, it's a little rough if you get pushed in because mana can be a problem. They did just knock off, like, 60 mana off of his first, off of just his base mana, so his first couple of backs are going to be rough. And then he has a hard time last hitting under tower as well, just because he's not going to have the AD to secure those ranged minions without using spells if they're taking tower shots, so that's kind of rough. He's very squishy, easy to engage on, has very limited CC, but he does do a lot of damage at level 6, really good in team fights, obviously extremely good at taking towers, so if you do get ahead, you know, he just, like, really claps those towers, especially late game. He just completely obliterates towers. So that is very nice. And then he does add that little bit of extra, you know, just AoE damage to a team comp, AP damage that might be lacking otherwise. My biggest complaints with him are not only can it be a little rough early, especially if you're in the losing side of the lane, he just doesn't do a lot of sustained damage. He doesn't do what a lot of comps need AD carries to do, right? So he has a hard time doing sustained damage. He does not take Barons very well. He doesn't do very well into tanks. And that's usually what you need with ADCs. And when I say tanks, I mean, like, you know, obviously stuff like Ornns and Sejuani's, but really stuff like Irelia, right? When they're going to have, like, Sterix plus, you know, all of this other nonsense where they just effectively have, like, 4,000 health. Like, they're basically tanks that also one-shot people. So stuff like that. Viego, these types of champions, he's just going to have a really hard time just killing those things. So that is rough, and those champions are everywhere right now. So I just don't really feel comfortable putting him much higher than that. I guess you could put him in tier 2 if it's a really good Ziggs and you have the right kind of comp for him, but otherwise it's kind of rough. Caitlyn is good if you hard dominate your lane and you start taking those towers and snowballing, if you use your traps appropriately. If you just do everything well, then yes, Caitlyn is extremely good and she's very oppressive. Now, I have also seen a lethality build on her. I'm not sure if that's meme or what. I felt like it looked pretty good in my games, but I don't know. I didn't check before the video to see how it's performing compared to other items. Looks like it's about the same, honestly. You got Dustblade, and then, yeah, just either going just any of these, Collector, Stormrazor, whatever. Because, like, the problem with Caitlyn historically is that she's very dominant in lane, but she sucks with attack speed because her base attack speed is like 0.56 or something. It's really low. Not as low as Senna, but it's bad. So it's, you know, with the traditional, you know, you go for crit and attack speed items, your Zeal type of items, you know, your Rapid Fire, your Phantom Dancer and stuff like that. She's okay with those, but that just hasn't been that great historically, and she gets, like, kind of weak in, like, that 2 to 3 item range compared to other ADCs, so she's pretty good on 1 historically, starts to get good again on 4, but overall is sort of rough. The lethality build kind of attempts to fix that by saying, look, I'm going to be bad anyways in the mid to late game, so let's just, like, go all in on the early game. And I think that really solidifies her niche as we're going for heavy poke, heavy tower pressure. And that's why I think that it's effective, because then that allows you to wave clear better with your Q, because kind of like with Sivir, kind of like with Varus, your abilities can't crit, but lethality does affect them. So if you're using abilities to wave clear a lot on these champions, then lethality is going to help you out with that wave clear. And then, of course, they've buffed her ultimate a ton over time. It has really high base damage, really good scaling with AD, and lethality is going to be really strong on that. Again, ultimate can't crit. Lethality does affect it, though. And when you have stuff like Dustblade, then that's also going to do extra damage on your abilities. So I like that. I think it's pretty good. Lethality, you can't crit towers either, but lethality does affect towers because they do have armor. So I think it just matches the playstyle of wave clear, poke, take towers, just accept that you're going to be bad late game, especially against tanks, and just go for the 25-minute win. So I just think that it's just owning her strengths and owning her weaknesses and sort of just doubling down on the strengths. So I kind of like the build. Once again, I don't know in like Challenger or in Pro if that would be good or if that's just meme. But in solo queue, it makes sense to me. I think it can be pretty strong if you're into that all-in early game. However, a lot of people are bad on her. So that's why I've got her down low. I just wanted to mention that build because it seems like all right. But a lot of people just do not do the traps correctly. They, they can't hit the nets. They don't put up enough pressure. They just, like, last hit minions instead of, like, applying pressure and poking under tower and stuff like that. So, can be really good if you're good on her, but most people just aren't. And then the other ones are just, they just have problems. Corki, obviously, is just in a really bad state. Needs to be reworked. He's okay in the early game, but he struggles later. Draven, I mean, you could put him tier 2 or tier 3. I feel like the items are kind of rough on him right now. On stream, people mention, okay, well, Bloodthirster or Shield Bow surely is good on him right now. And I guess it is, but the problem is he's short range and he's bad at team fighting later on, and he doesn't have a lot of mobility. So he does have a lot of burst damage early, but some of these other champs can put up pretty good burst, right? When you think about like Varus arrows, Sivir Qs, and stuff like that. Like they can do that damage, but they have longer range, more poke, and more utility. And like the runes are kind of bad on him right now too. So you can snowball really hard early if you do get those kills. So if you pair him with a Leona, with an Alistar, with something else that can be aggressive, I think he definitely can work. But that's part of why you're not seeing him as much in the meta right now as you have in the past is everybody's got high damage and burst. Potentially. They at least have a build that has the potential to do that. And kind of like with Jhin, I just feel like Tristana just does that a lot better as far as like early game snowballing and just taking over, and even Samira to some extent. Not as hard dominant early, but she can get out of control really quickly and start to dominate. Kalista like is okay in pro, but I don't know. She's just too hard for a lot of people to play in solo queue. Lucian's all right. I just think the item and runes aren't fantastic. Press the attack's still pretty good on him, but just really short range. He can be good, but he can struggle pretty hard late game. Senna, after the nerfs, I just feel is not that great. I would just rather play Caitlyn if you're good on that. Although she does have like some pretty good utility and some okay builds. I just feel like Caitlyn does what she wants to do better right now if you're in the market for that type of thing. But anyways, okay. Well, that's going to be it. So tier list definitely went a little bit longer than I thought, but I didn't do an ADC tier list, I don't think, last patch. So I just wanted to kind of catch everybody up to speed on some of the new builds and kind of where I think everyone is. But anyways, that's going to be it. Have a good day. Be sure to check out the stream, Twitch. I'm going over there. Well, by the time you get this video, it may or may not be going on, but usually starts around, I'm trying to get down to 11. Realistically, lately it's been 11:30 or 12. But sometime in that 11 to 11 p.m. to 2 or 3 a.m. is when we're streaming on Twitch. And it's very friendly, very chill. Come by, check it out. Check out the rest of the content as well on YouTube. And I'll see you next time. Have a good day.